Good morning and welcome to my blog. You may be able to tell by my voice that I'm not quite my normal self. I've been down for about a week with an upper respiratory infection, but I'm on the mend. But it's given me a lot of time to think about a few things, and I've been able to, when I have felt well enough, get on the computer and answer some of your comments. And I have been reflecting a lot on what is known as the expert-novice literature. And this is a topic that I covered in my university classrooms in my science methods courses for those university students who are preparing to be teachers in science classrooms in middle school and high school. And this is a topic that really applies to what we do here on this channel. We have so many people that have identified themselves as novice canners, newbies. And we're so thrilled with that. We love having newbies join us because it is so important that as anyone is learning about canning, that they learn the correct principles involved. And ultimately, our hope is to bring people from a novice situation to an expert situation. And so we can think of novice, expert as a continuum from beginners to experts. So what I'd like to do, this is going to kind of be like you are in my university classroom as we talk about this. Think about something where you really feel like you are an expert in. And then think of something else where you feel you are just a beginner, just novice. All of us, in our whole repertoire of things that we know, have areas of expertise and areas where we are just a novice. That certainly applies to me. I'm a novice with cast iron refinishing and seasoning, which is a video we're going to be releasing tomorrow. And you'll be able to see that I'm just at the beginning of my learning curve on that, so I'm very much a novice there. But I'm probably an expert in canning, and it has nothing to do with any degrees that I have earned, although some of the content areas that I have learned have connected with canning, because canning is all about a lot of science, physics and chemistry, and other concepts as well. So what I want to do is share with you from the literature of novice and experts 5 important points. Now it's fun to understand that this novice expert literature, which when I say literature, it just means that there's been a lot of research done on how a novice person thinks about whatever it is they're trying to learn compared to how an expert thinks. And this literature began, the research began with a person who was studying the difference between expert chess players and novice chess players. And once that research was published, it really caught on, and a lot of disciplines have done the very same type of research on what it means to be an expert compared to a novice in whatever the discipline or the topic might be. But what they found across all disciplines is the way that an expert thinks is parallel regardless of whatever the discipline is. So what do you think is an important characteristic that would qualify someone to be an expert? If you were in my classroom, I would be calling out for ideas. And I've done that so many times that I can tell you that one of the first things that people mention is, well, it's that they have done something for a really long time and they are very good at it. It may surprise you to know that that is not one of the 5 characteristics. The length of time that a person has done something, if that person is an expert, really does not play into whether or not they are an expert. Because it is very possible, and we know this from canning on both our site and other sites, where people will say something like, well, I've been canning for 40 years and I've done this the same way that my mother and great aunt have done it and nobody's ever died. I consider myself an expert in canning. Well, the length of time that you have done something does not qualify you as an expert. So what does qualify you as an expert? Well, it's all about how you think about things. So the first characteristic is that an expert has a deep understanding of the correct content knowledge associated with whatever it is they're trying to learn, whatever their field is. And the key word there is understanding. It's not memorizing facts or factoids, as I like to say, but rather it is understanding what the big ideas are, knowing how they fit together, and weeding out misconceptions as you go so that your content knowledge is deep and you really understand it. So that deep understanding of content knowledge is the foundation for becoming an expert. Now, as a novice, I have been able to tell by a lot of the questions that people ask where along that continuum between novice and expert a lot of people are, by the questions that they ask. For instance, a new canner might say something like, I'm trying to learn about X, about pressure canning. Can you recommend a book? Can you tell me where I can go to get more information? Now, that is a novice who is headed toward expertise, because that attitude of wanting to get the content knowledge under their belt is really, really critical. And compare that to a question that is, I just want to know if it's okay to can this. And that tells me that that person just wants a little factoid rather than a deeper understanding of whatever it is they're after. So the second thing is that experts notice meaningful patterns of information. This was illustrated to me in my previous university where I taught. I got a lovely grant, and I was able to take science teachers into the field, and we did a lot of scientific inquiry. I hired a staff. One of the people that I hired was a geology professor from our university, and he told this story to our group. He said one day, he said, I always cook my oatmeal in the mornings in my lab. I get a glass beaker, put it over a Bunsen burner, put the water in, and then the oatmeal in, and then when it's ready, I have my breakfast. He said, the other morning I was sitting there, and I was just watching as the oatmeal, it had thickened, and it was just about ready, but I paid attention to what was happening because I could see through the glass, and I noticed that those little pieces of oats would, first of all, the ones close to the bottom, would heat up, and they would rise to the top. Then, because it was cooler at the top, they would fall down again, get heated up, and they did these convection currents. So there was a circle going here, and then there was a circle going over here. All around the beaker were these circles. And he said, that connected with me about plate tectonics. And so how are the plates on the surface of the earth moved when plates collide with each other and one subducts under another or whatever? How they move is by these convection currents. And to test that out, I just put little flakes of paper towels. I tore paper towels and put it on the top to see if those circular currents would move those pieces of paper towels, and they did. And I thought, oh, good heavens, I would never, ever, because I'm a novice at geology, I would never have put that together just by observation. I would never have noticed that pattern. And so, if you are on the continuum between novice heading toward expertise, one of the things that we want to build is how we notice things and noticing patterns. And then that fits right into the third point, which is hierarchical organization of our knowledge. And all that means is that as we learn new information, we store it in our brains in a hierarchical way with big ideas at the top that are supported by supporting ideas, and then below that are the details. Now, if you are a novice and you get a new piece of information, it's like, okay, so this new piece of information and other pieces of information that you have, you juggle, and oops, sometimes you drop and you don't pick it up, and and it's just a juggling experience to try to figure out, where do I plug that in? Now, an expert with a new piece of information that fits in the hierarchy knows exactly where to plug that in. It's like putting it on a shelf. And so that hierarchical organization of knowledge, and then being able to chunk things together. And so in canning, for instance, one of the big ideas is, what do you think? Pressure canning. Pressure canning is a whole body of knowledge that is part of the larger discipline of canning food and preserving food. And so, is it possible? Can you just look at a recipe and by looking at the ingredients know immediately whether it is to be pressure canned or water bath canned? If you are on that continuum toward expertise, you'd be able to do that. Because what happens is then, and this is the fourth point, you can flexibly retrieve that whole chunk of information and know immediately with very little effort. Also, that flexible retrieval of information. Earlier in my life, I thought maybe I wanted to be a concert pianist. Now, that thought didn't last very long with me because I was raising a big family and didn't have the time to practice 8 hours a day, but I still took piano lessons. And one of my piano teachers, when I was an adult, she was wonderful. She was really an expert, and she taught me something about being an expert pianist. She said, Pam, look at the chord. I was learning a difficult piece, and it had lots of chords. A chord is where you play more than one note at the same time. And so the notes are attached to a stem. A stem goes straight up and down. And then the notes hang on it like apples on a tree. And so by looking at that configuration of notes and the spaces between, and where on the staff that chord occurs, where on the lines of music, where it's located, then I should be able to configure my fingers in that chord, knowing where to land on the keys and just come right down. And so that's flexible retrieval of information, is to look at a chord, get the configuration and come right down, and then to do it rapidly as I'm moving from chord to chord to chord. Now, as a novice, and I remember doing this when I was first learning, I would see a chord and I would say, oh my gosh, okay, let's see, that's 4 notes. The first one is this, and I put my finger on that note and then place the other 4. That's a novice way of looking at things, but that's on the road to expertise. It's just that I didn't have that flexible retrieval with little effort yet. And so with canning, flexible retrieval with little effort builds on deep understanding of content knowledge, noticing the patterns, organizing things hierarchically, and then we can reach up in our brains and grab this whole chunk of information with very little effort. For instance, if you say pressure canning to me, boom, I can bring this whole chunk and know exactly what I'm going to do, and it hardly was any effort at all. But as a novice, you may have to go back and look at the rules for pressure canning and what the equipment is, and that is just fine. Now, the last point, and probably the most important, is adaptive expertise. If we are going to become an expert at something, we need to be an adaptive expert, which means that once we become an expert, we don't just sit in one place and stagnate, but rather we stay current with information, we keep up to date on what is happening. And this really flies in the face of a lot of people who, I know that many of you have commented on this as well, who say, I've done this for 35 years, the same way that so-and-so did it. And having blinders on and not adapting to current information and valid testing information and data and the science behind it, even though you've done something for 40 years, does not make you an expert in that case. In fact, you are not even on the pathway from novice to expert, if that's the kind of an attitude. Then there are, from comments that have come in over the months and months that we've been, that our channel has been active, if you process your pickles in your dishwasher on the sanitize cycle because somebody else taught you that, or if you use your oven to can your spaghetti sauce for 15 minutes, you're not even on the pathway from novice to expertise, because you are off on a side trail that is not going to lead you to becoming an expert, because you are operating under the false premise that what you are doing is safe. And so I really just get excited when I read comments from people who I can tell in my mind that person is headed toward becoming an expert in this area. We've had a couple of people who have shared horrific experiences from early in their lives, either someone in their family or someone that they know who has had a terrible accident with pressure canning, and they have been literally terrified to try it themselves. But little by little, they are gaining more knowledge. And I say this over and over again. It's not an original statement because a lot of people use this, but knowledge is power. And that is really true. As you gain more knowledge, The power that you derive from that knowledge is the confidence to try something. And if the knowledge that you are gaining is coming from accurate sources, then you are on the path from novice to expertise. And honestly, it has brought tears to my eyes when I read some of the stories about people who have overcome their terror in attempting canning and have been successful. Or someone yesterday made a comment, I'm pressure canning for the first time and I'm so nervous. You know what, I remember being nervous the first time I tried to do pressure canning. It was scary. And yet having the gumption to go forward, willing to take that risk, and then the triumph that you feel afterward is just phenomenal to me. And it certainly keeps Jim and me going, because we really feel like the information that we are providing is helping people to move along that continuum from novice to expertise. So wherever you are on your journey, if you are off on a side trail, come back to the main trail that puts you on the trail toward expertise with sound knowledge, scientific knowledge, and then good practice to keep our families safe. So that's just a little bit about the novice to expert literature that is out there, and hope that this is motivating to all of us to improve our practice, to make sure that we're staying current, and to get knowledge from the proper sources. And so thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you soon.